Hi everyone, and welcome to the TIPDS podcast. My name is Dr. Gavin Krishnamurthy, and I'm here as always with Dr. K. Hello, Kay.
Hello, Govind. How are you this evening?
I am good. I'm good because we are doing a book club, The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegal and Tina Payne Bryson. And we're doing chapter 6, which is our last chapter. And for people listening who've been patiently waiting for this, thank you for hanging in there. We'll finish today. And just as a teaser, we're going to try and finish, and I will give you a little resource right at the end, a free resource that you can take with you to support your use of these strategies in the future. So let's jump into it. Kay, what did you think of the chapter?
Chapter 6, yes, called The Me-We Connection, Integrating Self and Other. I thought it was very, very, important in that it was all about the conversations that we have with children. And I think we have to be very sort of mindful ourselves that we set time aside in a busy teacher's schedule to have really good conversations with kids.
Yeah, so we've looked at some of those things in the previous chapters. I think we looked at this idea of developing insights, helping kids, integrate their implicit and explicit memories to try to kind of make some links between why some things made them upset and what they did about it. This chapter is more on empathy, this idea of being able to recognize feelings and desires and perspectives of another. And Dan puts that together, this insight and empathy into this idea of mindsight, which is kind of kids being able to access some level of sort of wisdom in how they solve social problems and things like that. So he also talks about this idea of interpersonal integration, that is, that we kind of integrate the way we think and feel about the world, including information about how other people might think and feel as well. And we were just chatting before, Kay, about how that's really tough for kids who've experienced trauma, isn't it? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do, because I think a lot of it boils down for them again to this whole lack of trust, rightly so, of the adults who have been not so nice to them in the past. So it takes great courage for them to even go there, doesn't it, and trust somebody enough to have a conversation and try and think what maybe they're going to get hurt again,
Yeah. Especially, I was thinking about children who have grown up with parents with kind of quite severe mental illness, and it's such a confusing and unpredictable thing, and sometimes it's actually really frightening, to actually think about what the parent might be thinking. So they actively avoid that, and some of that spills over into kind of their other relationships with peers and teachers or whoever it is. And one of the revelations we've learned from science recently is this idea of mirror neurons, this that we're finding neurological evidence of this concept of empathy, that if we see these fMRI scans of, I think it's been primarily done with monkeys, of monkeys watching other monkeys do things that they're interested in or they're intrigued by, what we see is that patterns of brain activation, both the monkey observing and the monkey who is actually engaging in the activity, is similar. So what that tells us is that, this is the kind of brain-based kind of evidence for social learning, that kids are always watching and they're always learning from things around them, but they're also picking up and experiencing similar emotions to the adults, the peers, and those around them as well. So if you have a child who's terrified or really worried or really angry, it's probably a reflection of the grown-ups around them who have behaved that way in a long time, that they then bring to school, so they see everyone as being mean and unfair and angry and about to hurt them, when that might not necessarily be the case. So we had a nice example of mirror neurons just recently. Kay had organized a recent talk where I talked about, gave a speech where gave a talk about self-care where I disclosed some personal information. It was quite moving. I was upset myself, and everyone in the audience was upset as
Yes,
well.
we all
And
started crying because you were sad. And yes, it was just, that's a mirror neuron, obviously, an example. We hadn't lived that experience, but because you were upset, we were all upset.
That's right, and that's hard. It's hard to fake that, really, isn't it?
It is. It's a bit
You
like
can't
when
keep
you
that.
laugh really genuinely because
That's
other
right.
people are laughing, but you don't really know what they're laughing about,
Yeah,
but you
that's
laugh anyway.
right. That's such a good one. Yeah, you see little children or babies even do that, just laughing at each other. And
Yes, and not
yeah,
knowing why.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Dan talks about this idea of like mental models. And there are different theories that kind of refer to this. I know John Bowlby has this idea of this internal working model where, they're sort of blueprints, so little templates about how we think about ourselves and the world around us. So if you have parents who are consistent and predictable and attuned, then you have a template for yourself as a child where you think people are fairly trustable, and you become more attuned to kind of deliberate signs of them not being safe, things like stranger danger.
Yep.
But if you need to learn that and you're a traumatized child, then you need to learn it from adults who are not like the people who hurt you and abused you. So people like teachers, who can stay calm and model good behavior. Because if you have a teacher who is stressed out, your mirror neurons is going to start firing, and the child's going to get stressed out as well. Have you seen that for yourself, Kay, with observing classrooms?
Yeah. What comes to mind as you are saying that, that this mirror neuron stuff where how we are feeling and behaving and sort of just is mirrored by the child. Some of the teachers that ask for support with children with very challenging behaviour, one of our biggest hurdles was in fact the fact that they were so fearful of the child who was violent and dangerous. Their fear sort of sabotaged any intervention because the child was mirroring their fear. And like we've said before, we had two completely flipped lids, and the situation became more unmanageable because both parties, the adult and the child, were fearful. So that mirror of fear and anxiety and, living on edge, just waiting for the child to do something wrong. It's difficult. It is, and I understand why it's so, because they are fearful. They want to keep themselves safe, the other kid safe, and the child that's having the difficulty safe. But children pick up on that very, very easily.
Yeah, and part of what we kind of talk about in the program is having lots of plans and structures and communication processes in place to give the teacher the best chance of being able to stay regulated and stay calm, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Because, Dan talks about this idea of either being reactive or receptive. So reactive is when the teacher's afraid, they're stressed, and they're just reacting to everything that the child's doing, which is what we know actually kind of makes things even worse, as opposed to being receptive or reflective, where they can stay reasonably calm. Like, you cannot stay 100% calm in these situations. We just need teachers to stay calm enough for them to be able to kind of think and contain the situation, but also be able to respond to the student in a thoughtful and meaningful way. And sometimes it's in those acute situations. Other times, you can just get chipped away at, or if it's a difficult classroom.
Wears you down.
Yeah, it wears you down through the term, and slowly it creeps into the way you manage, and that's where you need a bit of feedback, someone who can tap you on your shoulder and go, hey, you're not being yourself, what's going on? Because that stuff can really creep in.
Yeah, you seem really agitated, you seemed really short with so-and-so in the playground, are you okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And feeling safe enough to take that feedback and
Mm.
give that feedback too, I think.
Yeah.
So the strategy number 11 then talks about this increased family fun factor, making a point to enjoy each other, having fun. And I think that's quite important for classrooms and schools as well. Bit of fun, bit of play.
Yeah.
Engagement. What did you think about that, Kay? Do you think that's sort of unreasonable, or do you think
No, I
that,
think it's. I think it's. I think, you know, if I understanding the pressures that teachers are under now, I think I would need to put, you know, like a little cutesy little sort of cloud in my teacher book that said, "Don't forget to have fun," because I think we get so caught up in the, you know, the academic achievement and the data, and we forget to have fun and be silly and you know, get over yourself and stop taking everything so seriously. I mean, it's just very good idea if you can just stop, breathe, and just do something for fun, for no reason other than the fact that it's fun, you know. Doesn't need 25 outcome objectives or anything. You're just doing it because you're having fun.
Good for the kids and good
It's
for
good
the
for everybody, yeah. It's
yeah.
great.
So much that can be said about that, isn't it? About how kids
Mm.
learn through play, how humor and laughter actually facilitates learning. Happy kids learn more. I was also thinking about this idea of flow. You know, this idea that there's a researcher called Csikszentmihalyi who's written kind of a lot about these states that we go into where we're really enjoying something and we lose track of time. And often to facilitate those experiences, you know, there needs to be an adequate amount of challenge with an adequate amount of interest and fun. And that's kind of what we want for kids, is for them to lose themselves and love the process of learning itself. And that doesn't come without a bit of fun and play.
No.
The next strategy is being able to connection through conflict. So helping kids kind of learn through moments where they're not doing the right thing, where you can talk them through and have conversations in a safe way without shaming them, for them to start recognizing what things are like from other people's point of view, start learning skills of what we call social problem solving. What were your thoughts about that, Kay, about talking to kids after they've done something wrong or gotten into trouble? Obviously, there's the immediate thing once they've done it, and then there's the stuff quite after, which is the more restorative stuff. But there's other stuff that you can even incorporate into the curriculum, isn't it? Around, you know, characters having conflict, that you can think about what's happening for each person and how they're going to resolve it.
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done. I think we say, you know, we have a situation, not necessarily one that's suspendable, but you have a difficult situation, and most often it's the lack of physical time to talk to the child, or the space to talk to them, because you've got a classroom full of children, and then you've got to work out whether you're going to wait, or how long it is till you can wait, or how are you going to organise the space so you can talk to the child. You know, I mean, there's so many impacting factors in the statement that says teachers should have a good conversation with the child, which is ideally what it should be. I mean, the child going off and having a chat to the principal or whatever is not the point. The teacher needs to, you know, build up the close relationship and get it sorted. But it's really, really difficult to manage in a practical sense.
Yeah.
To be able to dedicate the time to it that you need to.
Absolutely. And I think it is the supporting people who really need to kind of step into that, really, isn't it? So in this conference we were recently at, there was a lot of talk about reintegration and the kind of process that goes with that, and the repair to the relationships that's occurred since the child's done something. And those are all opportunities to kind of think about, help the child just for a few minutes consider what things are like for other people. And obviously for traumatized kids, it's really, really difficult. They have this real strong sense of shame. They think they are just trying to humiliate them, embarrass them, put them down. They probably won't want to engage in the conversation. So it's a very, very fine art to engage them in a process like this. And often it's very gently kind of throwing up things about, you know, things that you think, might have happened, starting with the childs themselves. And often that is often what's most surprising for these students, is that when they come into these meetings or have these chats, that you don't launch into telling them what they did wrong, but that there is actually some sort of thought into the child's needs and their perspective of it, which throws them off
And
each and every time.
and even the fact that they're included in the conversation in the first place, and it's not
Yeah,
grown-ups talking about them and then
yeah,
telling them what they need later instead of
yeah.
asking them in the first place.
Yeah, which is often not a great use of energy, because if you actually listen to these kids enough and then ask them what to do, they usually know what to do. The
Mm,
point is not that they don't know what to do. The point is that it was hard in that moment to be able to do it, and that if we were to plan for it in the future,
yep.
what are like couple of things that the teacher can do or teacher can watch for? What are the couple of things that the student can try? What are things that we need to let other people know that they can help with that? So that sort of
Mm,
social problem solving stuff is what moves ahead. Really
mm,
tricky stuff, and yeah, but if it's done right, it can really support
mm.
kids going safe.
One little practical strategy, I guess, and this is just personally, that worked in my classroom when I didn't have time for the conversation I knew I should have had. In
Mm.
the interim, often I would just get the child to um, perhaps just draw me a picture to say
Mm.
sorry,
Yeah. Yep.
or draw about the incident in a book that nobody else needed to see, and
Mm.
just so that they had some processing time of their
Mm.
own
Mm.
until we got to
Mm.
it,
Mm.
seemed to be helpful for some. So
Yeah, that's great. And it's because a lot of these kids can't even tolerate talking about it.
no,
It's so
no,
triggering for them. But at the same time, you're giving them an opportunity to integrate some of those
mm,
memories and thoughts and feelings. And I'm even wondering how that might bring up stuff about things that happen at home, or, a similar situation where people got really angry, or, whatever it is. And not that you need to kind of do therapy with these children in
no,
the classroom, but that's that process of them doing their social emotional learning, because it's not just a set of skills, it's a whole heap of other things that are influencing how they can use those skills and when they can use it, and the things that they need, the extra things they need to kind of do to be able to successfully think in those moments to use those skills.
yeah.
um, so the last section is integrating ourselves, making sense of our own stories. So essentially, Dan's referring to here about how he's talking about parenting here, but I think it applies to teaching as well, where we fall into autopilot, where we drop back to the kind of parenting or teaching the way either we were taught, or doing, deliberately trying to do the opposite of it, which can be exhausting. Essentially not being very mindful about the influences that has shaped our style of teaching, and our kind
Mm.
of defaults of going back to teaching, the way we always do it. So the more we are clear about that narrative, the more thoughtfully we can respond to the kids and not just be reactive to them. And you had an interesting kind of reflection on this, Kai.
I did, yeah. When you were talking about it before, I thought, when I think it would be true of many, many teachers, if you reflect back to a teacher that you admired who made a difference, you tend to embed those classroom management strategies that you were very thankful for as a child in your own management of your classroom and the behaviour in your classroom. You tend to
Mm,
implement those because that's the way that a good classroom works, and that was the classroom that you felt cared for and safe in, because that's
mm,
why I think why we admire the teachers that we single out as those that made a difference.
mm,
Any person that I've ever asked what that teacher did for them, it was because they noticed them and they cared about them. So
mm,
I
mm,
think that,
mm,
yeah, we tend to mirror that classroom
mm.
management, even if it was, like mine 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Tend, you tend to, yeah, because you want to be that person
Yeah.
because they made such a difference. And I think,
And
yeah,
And we've talked about the mental models for the kids, but those are sort of our mental models too, aren't they? These kind of
Yes.
powerful influences and of people. And I remember someone saying to me, that to keep a check on it in terms of how reactive you're being, what capacity do you have to actually see mistakes as an opportunity for growth? That if the kids get something wrong in their lesson or their worksheet, it feels like we can tolerate that more than in their behavior. So, our capacity to tolerate kind of mistakes in their behavior, and obviously there are lots of things that influence that, including other kids there and all of that stuff. But our capacity to, tolerate that often is a good barometer for how reactive we are. Either we are too permissive, and that's not helpful either, or we're too punitive and reactive, which is not helpful either. Which nicely pulls us back to the very, very first concept in all these chapters, which was, floating between the banks of
Chaos, yes.
chaos and rigidity. So I guess that's a nice way to kind of wrap up some of what we've been talking about with this book. So, Kay, were there any highlights from the book at all for you in terms of what stuck out to you the most and what you'd probably take away the most from the book?
I guess I was just thinking about this chapter itself, but it sort of relates to a thread through the whole book, I think, is that this was particularly about difficulty with demonstrating empathy. Kids that do, they need to be guided and encouraged the same as if it was academic. And I think that thread is something that's really, really important, that we need to look at it as an opportunity to teach a skill that they don't have. And that's quite difficult when it comes to not being able to regulate your behaviour and not be able to understand people's emotions, because I think we still tend to think, oh, well, everybody can do that. I don't know what their problem is, We can be a little bit dismissive that way. And I think we need to stop and think this is a problem because this child doesn't have the skill.
Yeah.
So I need to teach it the same as I'd teach any other skill.
Absolutely. I mean, I was struck by how a lot of the strategies are sort of conversational between the child and the student or the parent, and it kind of made me think about how I suppose all of learning sort of sits in those conversations really, and relationships really. You might have a pretty looking worksheet or impressive looking presentation, but ultimately the learning actually occurs from kids talking to each other, kids relating to the teacher, and kids having those conversations. And I feel like somehow maybe we've lost sight of that with all the pressures that are on teachers.
Absolutely. And I know that the best progress that we made with children with very, very challenging behaviour that was, unsafe and very dangerous, we knew we'd made progress when they felt that they'd disappointed us. And that was all about the relationship that we had, to that point. It wasn't about anything else, really. It was about the relationship had taken a dent and they felt sad about it and they wanted to do everything they could to make it up. Because it was so valuable to them. It wasn't, like you say, it wasn't about how many, stickers they'd got that day or where they were on the traffic light. It was about, how they disappointed their friend or the adult.
Yeah, and those mirror neurons restructuring right there.
Yes.
It's probably because they've got adults who care about them as well. All right, well, that's it for us with the book. Now, I did promise some resources. So Dan's got a refrigerator sheet, which is just a collection of the strategies discussed in the book. We can put a link to that in the show notes, which is on tipbs.com/blog. You will find that under the webpage, under the post for this podcast. Apart from that, I think we can finish up. Thank you, Kay. That was good fun.
Yes, thanks, Govind.
And we might sit to review another book soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for listening. See you next time.